You guys for introducing yourselves to me. This is a really cool opportunity for me. I got into longevity medicine maybe 4 years ago, of all things, at a real estate conference. There's a doctor that was a neurosurgeon that got into real estate and made millions of dollars. And so he pivoted to real estate. He had a conference out in Arizona, and Christy and I went out there because it was right post COVID, and we were stressed out and we were just looking for something. And he had his own longevity doctor from California come out and give us like a 45-minute talk. I left there with way more questions than I had answers. But one thing was really clear. I was way more interested in this subject of longevity than I could ever be interested in real estate. And that's probably a good thing. So we do have some real estate homes, but longevity is what we really enjoy spending our time doing. So I appreciate, Naveen, you getting with me. We met through a mutual friend, and when I first talked with you, you were like looking for Peter Attia to show up. And I'm like, look, man, I am no Peter Attia. I don't know if you guys know that name. I'm not Brian Johnson. Thank you. But I'm just an 82-year-old family medicine doctor from, you'll laugh. See, Claire, I told you that they would laugh. I said, if they don't laugh, I'm going to tell them it's Father's Day weekend. I have to be able to say dad jokes. It's just part of the deal. So I think my mission today really is to spark a fire of curiosity in you guys for longevity, the same way that I was touched a few years ago. Whether this be for your patients, your pals, your family, or even yourself. Has some technology glitches right before we started, as you probably saw, but I think they've been worked out. So I really feel, Claire, that to do this right, the first thing we've got to do is define the playing ground that we're operating from. I'm an old football player from high school, and like you had to know that you've got 10 yards to get to the next first down. You have to understand some of this. We all know this because we're in medicine, we're physicians, we understand the importance of basic science, and it's fascinating how that has kept up with some of the advances along the way. So the first thing I want us to do is spend maybe about 20 minutes looking at basic science principles in longevity. And then after that, I really want to then lean into some strategies that we could find that might help us overcome some of the processes of aging. And then at the end, I really want to nerd out and show you guys all the stuff that you can do. It's going to be a little fast-paced and maybe a little overwhelming. And the point isn't to throw too much at you, but really just to let you see the breadth of opportunity that we have with our lifestyle, with testing, with monitoring, and how important some of this stuff might be as the years go by. So I've already been introduced. This is my bio. This is my beautiful family. Maybe I should just focus on them. That's myself and my wife, Christy. They're in the middle. Christy is the reason that I got into longevity medicine officially, and I'll share that story in a minute. And then next to her is our daughter-in-law, Randy, and her husband, our son, Joel. Joel is a cath lab nurse in Abilene at Hendricks Hospital. And then next to me is Claire. Claire actually works for me at Revive. I'm so happy to have her. She helps make all these beautiful slides and keeps me in line. And I don't know what I would do without her by my side in all of this. And that's her husband, Tommy. He's a football coach and a high school teacher he just moved. Lucas Lovejoy High School up in Lucas, north of Dallas. So some interesting things about all of this is that you don't really get education for longevity or anti-aging stuff in medical school, right? We didn't get taught nutrition. We didn't get taught a lot about lifestyle. And so if you want to start doing this, you really have to go find the information on your own. And so because of that, I've gone and taken some certification courses. The Beldenine method is one that I actually took down in Houston, and it taught me some advanced strategies for screening of cardiovascular disease. The Institute of Bioidentical Medicine is where I learned how to really do bioidentical hormone replacement very, very well. And then the HEA Longevity, it's a certification course that I'm enrolled in currently. I'm about halfway through it, and I've learned a tremendous amount. This field is expanding and growing all the time. There are new findings and new trends and pathways that are being discovered constantly, and it's really a lot of fun to try to keep up with. This is the embarrassing part of the talk, and so I'm going to roll through it real fast. But Claire thought that I should introduce myself. I was born in Abilene, Texas, and I've been in Abilene my whole life. I grew up in a little town up in the Panhandle called Sundown. Now in sundown, there were 29 kids in my graduating class. You could do two things in sundown. You could go to the bus barn and smoke weed, or you could play sports. My dad would have killed me if they ever found me in the bus barn. So I played sports, and then I met my wife. She was not 10 years old at this time. I promise she was 16. We went to senior prom together, and that was our first date. Then we went to college together, and then we got engaged towards the end of college. I graduated from Abilene Christian, and then we got married the very next weekend. We moved to San Antonio for medical school. And you remember your medical school buds, right? Some really good pals. I had a lot of good fun. Can you guys tell who the family medicine doctors and the primary care are in the picture? Yeah, we have our fingers up our noses. The other guys are like urologist and orthopedic surgeon, I think a CT surgeon. But nonetheless, we still graduated from medical school. And then this is the photo that my wife found to share of my residency at John Peter Smith. I think that sums up training, right? It's grueling and you just sleep all the time that you're at home. But we still had time to have our son Joel. And then we finished residency, had a party, and then we moved out to Graham, Texas. Graham is west of Fort Worth, about 100 miles. It's a town of 8,000 people. We have a 25-bed hospital. We used to do everything there. We've dropped obstetrics over the last 10 years just because of expenses and volume. But Claire was born there like 2 months after we moved to town. So we bought some land out in the country. We were fortunate enough to build our forever home out there. We raised the kids. We were really involved in our church and in our community. I was the sideline doctor for the football team for about 20 years and really enjoyed my time doing that. But then eventually the kids grow up, they go off to college, and then they all get married, and you're so thankful when the kids have come that full stride and they're adulting well, and you're so proud of them. So the empty nest then has given me some opportunity to reflect back and think of what I'm going to do with the second half of my life. And so I've been able to meet some really great people, some nurse practitioners that'll partner with me. I've posed for some really weird professional photographs. And then I've created a team of my longevity center. It's called Revive Longevity Center. I have some really wonderful people that work with me, nurses, health coaches, Claire, and we have a lot of fun doing what we do. Okay, we got that over with. Now, I mentioned earlier that I kind of got interested in 2021 at the real estate conference in longevity medicine, but this is Christy and I at Claire's wedding 2 years ago, this coming Tuesday, right? And so about 3 months before that picture was taken, I came home from work one day and Christy grabbed, I swear this is the truth, you can ask her later, she grabbed me by my scrub top and said, "If you don't fix my hormones, I'm going to kill you." I took her serious. I decided then and there that I was going to try my best to become an expert in perimenopause, right? Because I could tell that she was suffering. And you know what? We made some mistakes, some blunders along the way. We tried several different roads. But I'm going to say 3 or 4 months after that picture was taken, she was probably 90% better. And sometimes I get choked up thinking about it because I felt like I got my wife back because she was really in a tough spot. So I think my enthusiasm for assisting people in the middle of life when some of these things start to happen really flourished because of what I saw in my own wife. So my education in bioidentical hormones then turned to education in testosterone replacement. It evolved into learning more about cardiovascular screening, and then I really dug in deep on lifestyle medicine, and ultimately I established my longevity center, where we really feel like a holistic approach can merge with modern medicine and give outstanding results. So my aim extends way beyond simply trying to make people live longer. I mean, who wants to live longer if you're going to spend the last 15, 20 years lying in a nursing home bed? What we really want to do is to help people live better for however long that lifespan is going to be. It's hard not to get a little bit on a soapbox at this point, but it's amazing how this journey has transformed my practice. It's impacted the lives of myself, obviously of my family, but even my staff. They have bought into this, and it's amazing to see how some of these methods and these ideals change the way you approach life in general. What it's done also for many of my patients has been truly transformational. I really feel like doing these types of lifestyle changes is one of the things that medicine has missed for years and years. Leaning into it makes a big difference for us. But we need to talk about the difference between health span and lifespan. Lifespan is obviously how many candles are on your birthday cake on the day you die. That is plain and simple. Adding extra candles may not really add quality years that we want to engage in. But health span is something that maybe we should think about focusing on. Health span is the number of those years in your lifespan that we get to enjoy good health, where we're free of chronic disease and physical impairment and cognitive decline. So Naveen helped me steal this graph from Peter Attia's book. I appreciate that. It really does a good difference of comparing the difference between a traditional lifespan model versus what we might could achieve if we focused on our health in midlife. So this line on the left represents what we would typically see. Somewhere just after midlife, we start to have a pretty sharp decline in health. And we spend the last third of our life with our health being further and further diminished by chronic disease. The arrows pointing up where it says increased health span is the effort to try to achieve that line on the right. And it represents the things that we might could do, the things that we could change with our lifestyle or maybe some targeted medical interventions to keep our health at a much higher level for the second part of our life. And then we may end up achieving that only to end in a sharp, steep decline at the end. But if you look at the end when you get close to death, Peter Attia refers to the marginal decade as that period of time where we take somebody on that left-hand curve, maybe 5 or 10 years from dying, and we spend a lot of time practicing hard medicine on them. We push hard, we treat them hard with medicine. It's a doctor's appointment every week so that they can maybe squeak out another 5 or 10 years, but with a health level that's really low. And so the point of longevity medicine is to try to keep your health at a high level for as long as you possibly can. So to me, longevity medicine is really 3 things. Number 1, it's preventive. This approach is all about trying to stop age-related disease before it even begins. Think of it as advanced screening. It's really great risk reduction in terms of lifestyle changes, and it's a lot of preventive testing that we can do. The second thing is that it's personalized. So all of those things that are preventive, they can be done for us individually. We can do a lot of this based on your unique genetics, some specific biomarkers, and then your particular lifestyle and goals. So longevity medicine becomes quite unique for each client out there. But longevity medicine is nothing if it's not also proactive. Because if I don't have buy-in from my clients, none of this stuff is going to work. We aim on a daily basis to optimize sleep, nutrition, movement, and even our mindset. And if we actively manage those areas, there are real ways that you can increase your health and increase your health span. But then the question becomes, how do we get there? What are the levers that we can pull to make these things happen? What are the scientific principles that we can lean into? So for the next 15 minutes or so, I want us to look at kind of the down and dirty view of what happens with the science behind longevity medicine. Longevity science really focuses on what happens with cellular breakdown and how that leads to aging in the beginning. So the cellular breakdown is going to turn into a phenotypic change, right? And that may be something like atherosclerosis that causes a heart attack. So when we're looking at these cellular changes, we recognize them in what we call the 9 hallmarks of aging. We're not going to look at all 9 of those. We're going to focus on telomere, senescence, and autophagy, things that you guys probably remember a little bit about. I was familiar when I started hearing this stuff again, but then we're also going to talk about a couple of biochemical pathways that are critical in longevity medicine. I'd never heard of these before, but it's the AMPK and the mTOR pathways. And then we're going to wrap up this first talk by talking about the concept of hormesis. So these are the 9 hallmarks of aging. I don't know if you guys can read them well, so I'll just start with the blue, like at the 1 o'clock up there. It's genetic instability, telomere attrition, epigenetic alterations, loss of proteostasis, deregulation of nutrient sensing, mitochondrial dysfunction, stem cell exhaustion, cellular senescence, and altered intracellular communication. And recognize again that all of this is happening at the cellular level. But it might be important to point out that what happens to us and what happens with our health, only 10% of it is because of what is written in our genome. The other 90% of what happens with our health is because of our lifestyle. And so much of our lifestyle impacts the green thing over there at 3 o'clock, and that's our epigenome. I also didn't really understand what the epigenome was when I got into this study, but the epigenome is in the cell nucleus, and it involves everything except for the chromosomes. So remember, chromosomes are big and long, and if you stretched them out, they would like go all the way around the world a few times, but they're compacted tightly into the nucleus, wrapped around histones, which is that hockey puck looking thing. And so the epigenome operates around the chromosomes to unwind it at particular points so that the body can decode the DNA and make proteins, or get in there and fix something that's maybe you have a translocation that the body needs to get in there and fix. The epigenome helps to drive all of that. And our cellular health is a big part of whether the epigenome can work in a healthy way. So this next slide is going to show those 9 hallmarks of aging up at the top. And at the bottom are all the chronic diseases that we get to treat, right? We've got heart disease and diabetes and Alzheimer's, cancers, immunocompromisation. So if you look at the example of heart disease, atherosclerosis, it happens because of a combination of genetic instability, some deregulated nutrient sensing, epigenetic alterations, mitochondrial dysfunction. So is it important to remember that? No, but just the concept that the diseases that we treat are happening because of cellular problems that start about 20 years before we can actually make that diagnosis. Okay, so in his book, Outlive, Peter Attia talks about the 4 horsemen. And these are the 4 most common reasons that Americans die outside of trauma. So if you take those 4, if you take trauma away, what's the number 1 cause of death in the U.S.? Heart disease, yeah, absolutely heart disease. What's number 2? Cancer, yeah. And I heard somebody say number 3, diabetes. Yeah, absolutely. Metabolic disease and all the complications. And then number 4? Where's my neurologist? Dementia, yeah. It's neurodegenerative diseases, which is going to be Alzheimer's. It could be Parkinson's. My father passed from ALS. All those things are kind of wrapped up into neurodegenerative disease.
Is it true that cancer is catching up on taking over heart disease?
Yeah, I'm not the expert in those type of numbers, but yes, there's so many advances in heart disease, and cancer's tricky. Yeah, absolutely. So these 4 areas are really critical in our journey towards longevity. Next slide. They remind us that aging is not just a number. It's really more about optimizing our physical, mental, and emotional health. So I want us to explore some science that we can use to really enhance our opportunity to keep chronic disease away and to not have to put up with these 4 horsemen. So let's start with a brief review of telomeres. Remember that telomeres are like protective caps on the end of the chromosomes, and they play a vital role in cellular health. Each time a cell divides, though, the telomeres get a little shorter. And eventually they become so short that they impair the operations inside that cell. That cell then kind of becomes a zombie cell, so to speak, and that leads to instability in the genome and chronic inflammation in that cell, in the cells around it. But then there's an enzyme called telomerase that helps to repair how long the telomeres are. But as we get older, telomerase doesn't work as well, and so we end up having attrition or shortening chronically of those telomeres. But there are some nutrient things, some natural protectors that we can focus on that can help protect the length of the telomeres. So this is where a lot of supplements and some dietary things come in. Vitamin D is important. Green tea extract, there's ECGC in green tea, and that's also an important telomere protector. Cruciferous vegetables. Your mom told you to eat your broccoli. She was right. 1.5 cups every day of cruciferous vegetables makes a big difference. Curcumin, you guys know that's found in turmeric. It also is important. Resveratrol is interesting. You guys remember several years ago, it was like red wine is going to save us from all of these problems. It's because it does this. It helps with the telomere length. The problem is that it's actually This resveratrol is actually found in this red grape skins. And if you want to try to drink enough wine to get that therapeutic dose of up to 500 milligrams a day, you have to drink 1,700 bottles of wine a day. I heard that number and I took it as a challenge. It did not go well. 10 out of 10, don't recommend it. Grab some supplement, it's a lot easier to do. Omega-3 fatty acids then are the other opportunity. Okay, so we've talked about autophagy. We've talked about telomeres. Now let's look at cellular senescence. So this refers to cells losing their ability to divide, and that often happens because of the shortening of the telomeres, and we call these things zombie cells. As we age then, the number of zombie cells in our tissue increases. Another important aspect of this is that happens to our immune system cells also. That's called immunosenescence. And when that happens, inflammation starts to go up in the body. And we all understand what a difference that makes on the diseases. So these zombie cells accumulate. That accelerates the aging process in our body. The good news is, though, that it's been shown that if you can find a way to clear some of these zombie cells out, that it actually will extend the health span. And so there are a couple of things that do this. One of them is called quercetin and the other one is fisetin. You can find them in common foods like onions, apples, strawberries, red onions. It's not as extreme as with resveratrol, though it takes a lot of those things to really get enough of these nutrients in your system. And so there's a new type of a nutritional thing out there. It's at the very bottom in bold letters. It's called a senolytic. And we'll talk more about these later. There's a particular brand that I like, but senolytics do a good job of helping the body to clear out some of those zombie cells so that there's less inflammation and degradation happening in the tissue. Okay, so far we've talked about telomeres shortening and how that process leads to cellular senescence, and all of that causes aging to accelerate. Autophagy now acts like a cellular cleanup crew. It gets into the tissue and it cleans out the leftover organelles or the little strands of proteins that are floating around that don't have a purpose or a job. All that stuff is leading to inflammation and degradation of tissue. And so autophagy activity level declines as we age. And so you've got a buildup of senescent cells. You've got autophagy that's working to clear them out, but autophagy then starts to slow down a little bit as well. So it would be great if we could potentially find a way to do just that. Well, it turns out that if we are able to, and they've done this in my studies, if you can make autophagy happen at a faster level, it does restore a more youthful cellular housekeeping activity, and that has proven pivotal in preventing further deterioration and functional decline. It's also important to note that this is suppressed by that pathway that we mentioned earlier called mTOR, and we'll get into more on that in just a minute. So there are some natural compounds that will help with autophagy. The first one is spermidine. You can find this in tempeh and in wheat germ. Green tea extract, again, is an important one. Quercetin, one of the senolytics that we talked about, and curcumin as well. Lifestyle interventions are probably our biggest opportunity to help with autophagy. Calorie restriction, fasting, and at least 60 minutes of aerobic exercise on a daily basis make a big difference in how that pathway works, and it activates autophagy. There are some pharmaceuticals actually that do this as well. Metformin has been shown to work on the AMPK pathway, which we'll talk on in a minute, and that activates autophagy to happen. Rapamycin, of all things. I don't think I've ever written a prescription for rapamycin. If you've ever worked on the transplant team, you've probably given it out like Tic Tacs, right? But it's not something that I do. I'm scared of rapamycin, but there are a lot of physicians in the longevity space that use it and give it to a select number of clients. And we'll talk a little bit more about why that happens. But as we dive into this next topic, we're going to look at these pathways, mTOR and AMPK, and these proteins called sirtuins that work in the epigenome, and they all work in a coordinated, balanced way. And it needs to be balanced kind of the way a symphony needs to be balanced. You don't need your strings coming out too strong and covering up something else. Everything needs to work in harmony. So these three players, mTOR, AMPK, and sirtuins, are at the bottom line are really involved in our body's response to nutrients and stress and have a lot to do with how our metabolism works. And they're truly keys to understanding how we do longevity medicine. So the mTOR pathway. mTOR stands for the mechanistic target of rapamycin. It acts essentially as the body's anabolic switch. So when it's turned on, and it gets activated when nutrients are high, when there's plenty of food, when there's plenty of energy to burn, mTOR gets activated, nutrients are abundant. This is going to promote growth, this is going to promote muscle development, it's going to promote energy storage, and it's necessary for being strong and healthy. The problem is that it can backfire on us if we never take our foot off the gas. And so mTOR is important for building up, but at some point our body needs to take a break. So mTOR then is going to promote protein synthesis. It's going to promote cell growth and proliferation. When nutrients are plentiful, mTOR steps in and it promotes these processes. However, mTOR also inhibits autophagy. And that's a big issue, right? Because we want autophagy to get into our tissue and clean out those leftover organelles, the protein chains that are floating around doing nothing. And so that's a vital part of the whole anti-aging process. When mTOR is activated too often, we miss out on that crucial cleanup process. So in summary then, I'm probably saying the same thing all over here again, but chronic mTOR activation is linked to accelerated aging. Let's be clear that if it stays active for long periods, we're going to fall at risk of age-related diseases, anywhere from cancer to metabolic syndrome. And this is where rapamycin comes into play, because rapamycin directly blocks the mTOR pathway. So there's a lot of study on rapamycin going on right now. As I mentioned, I'm not ready to prescribe or use it, but I'm really interested on the future of this and the strategies that may come about because of its impact on this system. Okay, from there, let's move on to the AMPK system. AMPK is activated during low energy states when there aren't many nutrients around, like when we're fasting or our calories are restricted, whether it's on purpose or it was 10,000 years ago and we're migrating and there's not a lot of food to eat. This is how we conserved energy and can make it through hard periods when you look back at evolution. So the activation of AMPK has significant implications on our health, and really I think there are three of them. First of all, it is a direct inhibitor of the mTOR pathway. So you can't have your foot on the gas with mTOR and then apply AMPK also. So AMPK stops the overuse of that mTOR pathway. The second thing is that it enhances insulin sensitivity and mitochondrial biogenesis. Both of those are keys in maintaining metabolic health. And then it also promotes autophagy. We've talked about how important autophagy is, and AMPK is a direct stimulator of that. So I think of AMPK working kind of opposite of mTOR, that they have to work in conjunction with each other. And this makes a 50-year-old guy who grew up in the country driving hot rods think about driving a clutch, right? So if you've got a transmission that's got a gas pedal and a clutch, if you're on the gas, you're getting somewhere, you're building up to a direction, the motor's running, we're turning high RPMs, but what happens if you just put it on the floor and never let up? The engine's going to overheat, things are going to start to break down. It's not good on the whole system. So we need to have a time where we let off the gas pedal, put in the clutch, let the RPMs come down, let the motor recover a little bit. So if we look at ourselves as a similar machine, there's a back and forth between building up and resting and recovery. Building up, resting, and recovery. So the next thing that I want us to touch on then are sirtuins and the role of NAD. So sirtuins are these proteins that set in the epigenome, that area surrounding the chromosomes inside the nucleus. They're a family of enzymes that require NAD to function, and they're crucial for longevity because, first of all, they're responsible for detecting damaged DNA and unraveling that strip from the histones so that there is access for the other components to get in and do repair. The other thing that they do is they play a big role in maintaining healthy mitochondria, and there's a particular one called SIRT1 that is an activator of AMPK and a blocker of mTOR. So all of these things then work in conjunction based on what's going on in the organism to keep things in balance. So sirtuins, particularly SIRT1, rely on NAD to function. NAD levels, though, decline as we age, and that decline really impacts our ability to have healthy cellular function. That impairment then is related to a lot of those 9 hallmarks. In particular, we see mitochondrial dysfunction and genomic instability because of that drop in NAD levels. So researchers are looking at some components like NMN and NR that are compounds that should help to build up NAD levels. One of the researchers used to be a geneticist at the University of Georgia's Medical School. His name is Kim Shi, and I've got an opportunity to talk to him one time. Fascinating research that he's doing. I am using some of his NMN product right now, and I've doubled my NAD level, and it was tested on an intracellular level. So it's interesting to see how this stuff is coming about. The next slide is one of these horrible pictures that we hated in medical school, but we'll just glance at it for a second. It's really just a summary slide. You can see mTOR down here with 4 red arrows down below it. Remember, mTOR is the body's anabolic switch. It activates when nutrients are abundant. It causes an increase in protein synthesis and in cellular construction. AMPK up there in the yellow box is the master cellular energy sensor and regulator. It controls our metabolism and it responds to the status of energy and fuel. So you can see over there at the bracket at the right, a reduction in calories, exercise are going to trigger the AMPK pathway. And then you can also see where the AMPK, the blue line, go down, it blocks the function of mTOR. So there are some activators of AMPK. Some natural compounds are found in berberine, resveratrol again, but please take the supplement. Quercetin, one of those senolytics that we talked about. Capsaicin, found in chili peppers, and then green tea again. Green tea shows up a whole lot on these lists. Lifestyle, again, is probably the most important way we can affect this. Caloric restriction, fasting, whether it be for a prolonged fast or even intermittent fasting, can be very effective. And then metformin is an activator of AMPK. Okay, so the last little topic here I want to talk about is hormesis. And so this is the reason that longevity and cold plunges are connected together. Anybody done a cold plunge? Okay, we've got a couple, very good. They're miserable, they're painful. Why would we even want to consider jumping in 50-degree water for 2 minutes? And the reason is because of hormesis. So hormesis suggests that small stresses can enhance resilience in our body. And that's the point of it. Low doses of stress may offer health benefits, while high doses of stress can cause harm and actually accelerate aging. So our cells are going to react differently to a differing degree of stress. Obviously, if you stay in 50-degree water for 2 hours, you're going to have some problems and wind up in the ER. But when we do this on a shorter period of time, we get some actual benefit from it. So it's all about having a positive adaptive change. To me, the most obvious example of this is going to the gym and lifting weights. You go in there, you do some bench press, you break down your pectoralis and deltoid muscles a little bit. Over the next couple of days, what happens? Those cells are repaired, they hypertrophy. And then you come back to the next workout just a little bit stronger. And that is a really good example of hormesis. So there are some hormetic stressors out there. If we look at physical stressors, we could talk about exercise, cold exposure, heat exposure like sauna, and then fasting. And then there are some things that can stress us out a little bit from a nutritional standpoint. Caloric restriction is pretty obvious, but then polyphenols and certain spices can do that as well. So if we look at some of these just quick examples of the mechanism of how some of this stuff works, caloric restriction and things like resveratrol activate those sirtuins. And so when you activate the sirtuins, you've got healthier cells, and that promotes a longevity-associated pathway. Mild heat stress upregulates these things called heat shock proteins. And those are involved in enhancing cellular repair and survival. I think of those as kind of an internal defense system against damage to our cells. Physical exercise, we've mentioned that, but is a mild stressor. It induces our body's antioxidant defenses and metabolic function. When we're exposed to cold, then our bodies release norepinephrine. When we release norepinephrine, we get some remarkable benefits like an improvement in muscle strength, endurance, a boost in mood and attention, which also happens to a degree because of what this does on dopamine, and then even an increase in brown adipose tissue. So these interventions showcase how our bodies can thrive under mild stress, ultimately supporting a longer health span. So in summary, hormesis is the triggering of adaptive responses that bolster our cellular resilience and enhance our ability to withstand damage. The mechanisms involve modulation of gene expression in a nutshell, especially the pathways that are associated with maintenance and repair. Okay, so by subjecting ourselves to these mild stressors, we can become a more resilient organism. Okay, so in summary here, bringing it all together, balance really is key. Remember that mTOR promotes growth and building, but if it's overdone, it can accelerate aging. I want you to remember that AMPK and sirtuins, they support repair and create metabolic flexibility. And those things counter the effects of mTOR. Remember also that lifestyle interventions are key in all of this. Intermittent fasting, exercise, caloric restriction, they activate AMPK and sirtuins. They reduce chronic mTOR signaling, and all of that increases our health span. This then is the biochemical underpinning of the things that we try to do in longevity medicine.